And one of the things that Paul says in the book of Galatians, chapter 3, he says, "Oh, stupid Galatians," or "Oh, foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you?"
Yes.
Who has bewitched you? Did I not portray Jesus before your very eyes as crucified? Right? So what exactly does that mean? Well, so some exegetes believe that the meaning of this is that the Galatians were sort of given a different interpretation, a different meaning of the cross.
Yeah.
Something that did not jive with what Paul had taught them. But the wording is very interesting. Did I not portray to you Jesus Christ as crucified? Is it possible that the Galatians were actually told that the cross never happened, Jesus was never crucified? I mean, it's certainly a possibility. And of course, this is a genuine Pauline letter, which is written in the 50s. So one of the earliest books of the New Testament. In 1 Corinthians, which is also genuinely written by Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, it's very, very clear that the major issue in Corinth are these different sort of Christian factions. Yeah. But the main issue of Eris, Paul says, Eris is a Greek word he uses, which is sort of also the goddess of strife. The main point that's causing this contention is the crucifixion. You know, it seems like there are people in Corinth who are being taught different things about what happened to Jesus. And of course, in 2 Corinthians, we learn that, you know, that sort of Jewish Christians, they're coming into Corinth, sent by James apparently, and they're sort of re-evangelizing the people of Corinth. And Paul doesn't like this. They're teaching something that is fundamentally opposed to what Paul is saying. So what exactly happened to Jesus? There's no definitive answer to this. The substitution theory is certainly something that is very popular. What's interesting is that there was a group of early Christians called the Basilidians, and this is mentioned by Saint Irenaeus. That they were quite active in northern Africa, and Basilides. And Clement actually says that Basilides learned from Glaucia, who learned from Peter. So he sort of gives this sort of chain of transmission that goes back to actually Peter. But according to Irenaeus, Basilides was teaching in North Africa, a very early Christian teacher, that Simon of Cyrene was transfigured to look like Jesus and vice versa. Yeah. And that Simon was crucified. So this type of docetism, this kind of literal docetism. Yeah. So what's interesting is that by the time we get to the Gospel of John, right, John, because he has the gift of hindsight, he makes some really interesting, unique contributions when he's writing his gospel. So the synoptic gospels say that for no apparent reason, the Romans they pull a man out of the crowd and they compel him to bear the cross. And of course, in sort of popular Christian depictions and iconography and movies and things like that of the Passion Play, it's because Jesus is so, you know, he's so beaten and so, you know, he's scourged down to his, you know, bowels, as Joshua McDowell used to say, and his, you know, his muscles are falling out, and he's just too weak to carry the cross. But the Gospels don't actually say that. In fact, Luke doesn't even mention that Jesus was scourged at all. In Luke, no Roman actually lays a hand on Jesus, which is quite interesting. But they say that the synoptic gospels say that they just pull this man out of the crowd, Simon of Cyrene, to compel him to bear the cross. Now, John is probably writing around 90, 95, 100, even after that, probably. That's sort of the general consensus. And he completely eliminates this entire tradition of Simon of Cyrene that's mentioned in 3 synoptic gospels. So scholars, they see something like that, and they wonder, why did John do that? Why make this sort of edit? Well, maybe by the time John wrote his gospel, this belief was quite prevalent, that Jesus was not crucified, that someone else was crucified, that possibly Simon of Cyrene was crucified. So John wants to set the record straight, right, and say, no, he bore his own cross to Golgotha. And John does that quite often.